going to go over the brain, safe brain. So here's the connect, right? We gotta connect with the brain first. We got to figure out what's going on so we can have a calm place to connect. The brain has to be calm for that. You have to be calm for that. And so it's just a word, right? It really has to just be, it's about frontal lobes, but and being up here, what's going on right now, like stress, grief, loss, and trauma. I mean, what are you struggling with? Do you teach teens? Do you have teens? I mean, I had foster kids. I was insane. I was an insane parent before I was a therapist, of being a foster parent to like 25 plus kids over a 10-year period. That's what this started my career in this, really. And so I actually brought in teens. I didn't have the little kiddos. I had the teens in my house. So I got lots of training in that and trauma work and helping these teens that are going through lots of loss and grief and trauma. But right now, and that was a while back. So it's like, what's happening now? Like I said, we're starting adolescence way earlier. Each about 2 to 3 years, we're just getting a little bit younger and younger and younger and younger. And then what about boundaries and limits? We're going to talk about that because we're having a hard time with that. We're definitely being a lot more passive parents, helicopter parents, rescuing parents. And so we don't really, oh, we have to connect with our teen because we have to be best friends with them, things like that. How do we connect empathetically? We're going to go over the 5 steps. I have a whole workshop on that, by the way, that's called Emotional Coaching a Teen. So that's the whole workshop's about emotional coaching. So I just have one slide about the 5 steps in there. And then I have lots of tips and handouts in this one. I have several handouts at the end of the PowerPoint. So you can just print those off, or you can go to my website and they're all on my website too. But so there's just handouts. So things that I talk about, like the emotional wheel. If you need the emotional wheel to figure out how to listen and connect emotionally, we got to know what emotions we're having. So look, I mean, I always put little pictures of the brain up here because it's not easy. It's very complex. Insane. And I was like, wait, what are all these areas? But the frontal prefrontal area is what we're talking. The prefrontal and this frontal left and right lobe of where we actually have reasoning and organization and reward system and all those things. That's where we self-talk. That's where we have to be to do anything like this, to have a crucial conversation. So once we get past that and go in the midbrain, we're not doing so good. We'll be in survival mode or fight, flight, or freeze. So that doesn't work. Okay, so here's some stuff from Brainstorm. Okay. I have a whole workshop on how to start out the school year right and have brain focus. So that's a little bit from that. But Brainstorm is by Dan Siegel. He is in my top 5 authors. He'll never leave. Like Brene Brown and Gottman. Those are my top 3. And so Dan Siegel has a book called Brainstorm, and he wrote it for the teen and the parent. And I refer this to my clients all the time because it's a great book. It's a big, thick book, but it has everything in it. And it talks about the shifts that's happening. So we have to understand the brain first. Increased release of dopamine, like 3 times higher than ever before in adolescence. So 10 and up, we're releasing dopamine at 3 times higher than ever before. Their immune system is the highest ever, but they're pruning. So we have to go into wiser judgment in order to get out of the house. So this is why kids push our boundaries, and our job is to hold the boundaries. That's exactly what's happening. And so we have to just go, oh, yeah. So this book's really important. They're going to listen to their peers more than us. So if we're going to connect with our teens and have a crucial conversation about tough things, I promise you, they've already talked to their friends about it. like times 10. So, you know, and you guys can chime in on the chat on your experience of that. It's like, oh, you talk to your friends instead of me, and oh, that hurts my feelings. And why don't you just talk to me? I have lots of parents like with younger kids, like they don't talk to me. I think they'll talk to you. And I'm like, okay, they might. Um, so the myths are the raging hormones. That is 100% myth, by the way. That, and you can find that in this book. They push boundaries for attention. No, they don't. No, that's not what is going on. And trauma doesn't affect the brain. It absolutely does. So think about just the last year and a half or so, the trauma that's gone on of staying at home, doing homeschool, not being able to graduate, walk with your peers, all that kind of stuff that happened. Risky behaviors, impulsive. Nope, it's actually thought out. So these are the myths. It's actually thought out, and it's actually kids will do a pros and cons in their brain, and they will pick the pros over the cons. That's what happens, right? Oh, I'm going to drive fast. I need some dopamine. Oh, I need more dopamine. I'm bored because I'm used to being up here. I need a video game for hours up here. So the brain doesn't change or heal. That's a myth. It does. We can reverse damage. We can get, we can help trauma. Parents can control how the adolescent will be, how they will become. So what will they, how they'll, turn out. And I hate that. I hate that one. And there's a TED talk about it. Like I watch it and watch it and watch it. It's like, no, we have control over how our teen works and how our teen like turns out. And actually we found that we don't. We do our best, but at the end of the day, this is out of our control. They will take our love and our emotional guidance if they will, and they will choose other things, and usually, it's kind of like, well, they'll come around. Okay, so that's just a little bit of that. Now, understand that this is about the brain, so we have to understand what's going on. So if we get upset and we personalization, it's the 10th thinking error. If personalization says, I'm going to take on your problems and I have no control over it. So what we do is we have mommy guilt or daddy guilt, or parent guilt, or we want to take on their problems and we really actually don't have control over it. So what happens is we get into our own funk of rescuing. So we're going to do things that we normally wouldn't do as a parent when we have personalization going on. Okay, so we talked about stress a little bit. So what's going on with stress in teens? Just a little bit of statistics. So if you're in stress brain back here and not up here, good luck. You're not going to have a very good conversation or connection with your teen. So we want to reduce stress everywhere, in our home, in school, everywhere, because this has actually become an epidemic. And we don't have statistics during COVID yet, but not very many. So for teens, the most commonly reported source of stress is school. 83% getting good college, getting into college. What am I going to do after high school? We're lost. 70% is stressful. And I've had them in my office. They're very stressed about what their future looks like. They're very anxiety stricken about worrying about future. That's anxiety, worry about future. I've got 20-something-year-olds, I call them. I've got dozens of 20-something-year-olds that are just kind of lost, and they're trying to find their way through COVID, and after losing jobs and changing colleges or getting out of college or moving home. There's a huge shift in kids, adolescents till they're 26 living at home. That's happened. I mean, you can see what's happened to the rental industry. Can't even afford it. So they've had to move home. Many teens report lying awake at night, 35% overeating, skipping meals, 23 due to stress in the past month. 40% of teens reporting irritability and anger. This is before COVID. we're having a big surge in irritability, which is an underlying word of depression. 36% report feeling nervous or anxious, of course, fatigued and tired, 30%. So this is like, okay, 35, this is all going into when 35% of teens aren't sleeping, you're going to have 35% of them reporting that they're anxious, tired, fatigued, overwhelmed, because sleep is not happening very well. And sleep hygiene is my number one thing. I can't treat other things and if someone's not sleeping. So, okay. So this is, you'll see this in multiple webinars that I do, because this is just my explanation of how the brain works. And like I said, here's our frontal lobes. We have a thought comes in, then we have a feeling, then we have a behavior. So we have to start with the thought and the self-talk up here. And this is where we have physical response to our body. If we have a feeling, it's going to send us back to a physical response and a feeling and a physical response. And when we're past a 5, 6, or 7, we're starting to have those reactions. Well, so let me explain 5, 6, or 7. A SUD is a number 0 to 10. And 10 is you are in complete stress brain. You're having a panic. You're extremely in fight, flight, or freeze. So you're in survival. So fight, flight, or freeze, remember, back in the brain. You're just not able to function well. So 7, 8, 9, you're not self-talking. Okay. So we have to reason up here. So where we reason. And so if we're not reasoning and organizing up here, we're not going to have a crucial conversation with our teens. And so the question is, for me, for you, is when in the heck do you do this then? Because it seems like everybody's constantly back here. Am I wrong? Are we not present? We're not being in our wise mind, which is up here with our frontal lobe of right and left, organizing logic and emotion together. So it's really hard to connect. So we got to do the best we can. So we've got to get to a safe place, a breathing place, a present place to actually be able to do this. So these are the reasons why we're not self-talking, besides 14 disorders that are in the back of the brain, which is number 4, which is a mental disorder. Autistic kids don't self-talk and process very well. So there's a disconnect with self-talk and processing. So they're not going to process that well, and they can't self-talk that, get themselves down. So if we're in our fight or flight, we in flooding, if we're burned out, and if we're impaired. So think about, impairment as adults, as kids, as teens. This is blocked. So any impairment, meaning any prescription controlled substance, is impairment, literally. So if you are taking a very small amount of Adderall or an opiate or a benzo that's controlled, you are blocking your emotional brain up here somewhat. So it's really hard to have some reasoning when that's blocked. But impaired, illegal drugs, alcohol, it just doesn't work. So you're not going to be doing the frontal lobe fully if you're having one of these 4. Okay. Following me so far? Hope everybody is. And you can just chat me to tell me that you are following along. If you're doing okay. If you can see my screen. If you can't, then you just will have to watch the video later with the screen with it. Okay. So this doesn't say if we're in crisis. So it should almost. But see, if 1, 2, or 3, if we're in burnout or if we're in crisis and we're in deep grief loss, we just need to work with the crisis and the trauma. We don't really have crucial conversations. We just deal with the crisis at hand. So look at these losses throughout life and see if, it's like, okay, what's going on with our teen? What's going on with us? So school transitions, natural disasters, health traumas, developmental trauma, abuse, neglect, parent job loss, moving. There's a whole bunch of stuff, death and divorce. So this is like grieving books that you can click on to help face it. and just look at this list and say, okay, well, my teen's going through this, or I'm going through that. And you got to give yourself the break that you need to get out of the crisis if you're in some of this. Okay. So that's where we need help. You need some therapy, some support groups, whatever we can find you to help you get through that. Changes in friendships and breakup. This is in school transitions. Those two are my biggest right now. Kids are coming in with breakups and changes and school transitions. They're trying to adjust, and our brain has to it takes 6 months to do an adjustment. It's not a disorder unless it's goes into further symptoms, but it's called an adjustment disorder. So it takes 6 months to move through that after you move, after you change schools. So think about January, August to January. That's 6 months. We're just getting started with this new year. I see and talk to a lot of teachers, and I hope some of you are teachers. But there's a lot of changes going on, and unknowns, and teachers and school transitions of kids are struggling in school. So just watch that. Okay, so back to, I kind of mentioned Wise Mind earlier. So this is a little bit of back to Brainstorm. So in order to be safe, to start a crucial conversation, remember, we're starting with how to get us to a crucial conversation. We can't just jump in and say, okay, this is how we talk about, stuff on your phones or use of your phones, or how to have boundaries. We want to try to be reasonable and emotional together, which is Wise Mind. So here's the logic and here's the emotion. And Dan Siegel said you got to have insight, empathy, and integration. So we got to integrate these two. Okay. So that's that slide. Okay. So these are just some things to watch as we go through different crises. So self-soothing is an emotional depletion that we're trying to fill. So if your kiddo's having these, go back to logic, go back to emotion, and say, okay, how can we get logically, emotionally together on these self-soothing activities? Because if this is a crucial conversation, if you have a teen that's binge eating and throwing up, that's a crucial conversation. It's also a self-soothing behavior. If we're throwing up, we need some intervention for sure. But think about that, and little things and big things. So head banging's big. Wetting the bed is a self-soothing situation. So how do you have a crucial conversation, connect with your kiddo about that? I mean, if they're younger. So these are just some things, of course, that we switch to. We try to get some neural pathway habits going with going on a walk, or hitting a punching bag, or having emotional expression through art instead of banging, our head or something. So those are just a list of ideas. And so the emotional part, right? So the logic, Wise Mind, the logic part was that the emotional part. Sometimes we don't know what's going on emotionally, and that's why kids self-soothe, and they don't know what they're needing, because we don't know and they don't know, because it's a subconscious thing. So this is where we start. So the very first thing is we have to be aware of all emotions. So we have to emotionally coach everyone. So let's see, just checking the chat. And so that's the thing, is if we don't know what we're feeling, not why. Okay, my emotional wheel, I'll show you later, it doesn't say why we're feeling an emotion, it's what. So we want to have a crucial conversation about emotions very, very, very first. So it seems like you're feeling very frustrated because you are, kicking the wall. And then we recognize the opportunity to teach and have intimacy in that. But you can't, once again, have a crucial conversation and teach anything when that child is not in their frontal lobe. So if they're kicking the wall, for example, you don't do that. You're not teaching. that is not where we're going to wait until we get that kid to a 5. Then we're going to help them, understand a little more emotion and have empathy through that. But so we listen and validate and reflect. We coach, label how they feel. But then you set limits and problem solve. That is last. It's my favorite one. It has 5 steps inside of step 5. So it has 5 steps on my handout of exactly how to set limits and problem solve. And the child has to have choices in that. So it's like, you know what? Next time, kicking the wall is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me because here's my bar as a therapist is hurting yourself or others. Kicking the wall is domestic violence. That's a charge. You can't do that. You can't break your own stuff. You can't kick. You can't throw stuff. You can't, in your own home, and you can't get that. So it's a very serious issue. So it's like, okay, we gotta figure out something else besides kicking the wall. And that's where that's a tough one. That's past what we're usually able to do. So this is just one of the steps 3. So we're going to go into this. This is how we have to first start a first conversation and talk about tough things with our kids. So I see you, why you would be upset, and I would be too. I see you, I hear you, I see you. And you don't even have to say that. It's you showing up in being present with the child and seeing their perspective. So observation. State what you see, hear, touch, feel, no correction at this point. So back to hypothetically, someone's really upset and kicking the wall. You don't fix it at this point. You can't correct it now. You're going to tell me I'm crazy because it's like, you're going to say, stop it, stop it, stop it. That's a correction, right? That's what most parents do, what we do. And so we're like, need to calm down. Anyone in my anxiety program last night, that's one of my slides, is like, anyone that tells someone to calm down, it never works. It doesn't help to tell someone to calm down. Calm down. You're being ridiculous, right? And so we don't correct. We just state, okay, I see you're kicking the wall. You can make a statement that is unacceptable. I mean, if you need to. So is that correction? I don't know, but it's you can say that is, I need you to, blank, okay, without a correction. It's really tough. I see that you're really upset right now. So what, and then you can ask a question. So what would you like to do? Because this isn't acceptable. So, but the child does have some choices, but I'm going extreme here with the example, because when we are doing domestic violence and we're kicking something, I mean, what are you going to do? Grab the child and remove them from the wall and they're, 16, 17, 18? I don't know. It's really tough, but it's really getting to the point of after and the repair of after this. So that's unhelpful thinking errors, jumping to conclusions, and mind reading does not work. Overgeneralizing, like, oh my gosh, you're going to blank, if you keep doing that. So we go extreme. That doesn't work. And if you want to go to the thinking errors class, I got those on the YouTube channel, thinking errors part 1 and part 2. So do the best you can, but just remember, just state what you're seeing. I see that you're super upset and you're standing there and you're going to say it several different ways. And then, kid gets super upset, they kick the wall and they walk off. So then it's like, okay, let's wait until you get to a 5. Let's help you figure out how to do that better next time. But that's later. So this is just, so limits, right? So we're talking about limits, like here's our limits after step 3. Step 5 is the limits part. But this is an example in Love and Logics of how the choices are. So this is high school clear up here. So this little area right up here, if I had my, whoops, my pointer, would be the top part of this is high school. It's a small, tiny little area. They basically say after 17, you're done. There's limits, and they have tons of choices up here. So there's choices, but it's like you can choose. There's there's still choices of like, here's this or this. If you're late from your curfew, this is what's going to happen for sure. When they're living in your home, there has to be some limits, but it's very, very small limits. You pick your boundaries and you stick to them. And if it's curfew or if it's, alcohol in the home and you're underage, no way. If it's you have to pay for your own insurance for your car, that means you got to have a job, whatever that is. And then here's the natural consequences and the consequences if you don't do that. But down here we have tons of choices. You're giving the toddler and the elementary school kiddo tons of choices and limits. And as they go older, this is the best way of parenting, because authoritative doesn't work. Authoritarian, authoritarian doesn't work. Authoritative does. Okay, so boundaries. Why do we need them? Brainstorm, the brain changes. Just look at that. Values, moral, self-care, so respect, all those things. Just look at one of these and say, okay, what is it that we need to have boundaries, and why am I putting up boundaries? And you explain that to your team. And that's a crucial conversation right here. So we're going to start doing some preventative work, and we're going to do some delay of gratification. We're going to teach you that you have to work for something before you just get it. And that is really tough. I have that on one of the handouts in this PowerPoint. So this is why we have boundaries, and why we want to have a crucial conversation, and why we want to try to understand the tough things about what's going on. And in Brainstorm, he talks about, a whole chapter on how to deal with sex, how to have boundaries around what your moral value is connected to a boundary. So we are the guardian, we're the manager, and we're the source. So we have to provide the basic needs of support and wisdom and a safe place. And that's our job. Okay, so let's talk about now some things that we run into that are tough. Okay. Screen time. This is why so many people have said they're struggling with technology, with how to draw in the devices. I explain it as this. The only thing we basically have to take away now, unless you take away their car, is their phones. So what we do is we threaten to take away their phones. Now, when we do that, we are basically cutting off their arm, and they're going to bleed to death. That's exactly what's happening. And I had therapists tell me years ago when we were talking about this, it is an epidemic of survival and identity. So think about it. The iPhone connected to the hand is their identity. And it is so important to have connection behind this phone instead of face-to-face connection, right? And especially through COVID, look what happened. We were facing screen time for hours and hours a day. And so what happens is, burnout. A lot of things happen. Our sleep goes, our addiction to the boredom. We're not bored. We don't have to be bored, right? We just go to a device to numb out and distract, which turns into an avoidance. So we've gone into avoidance behaviors instead of just having it as a distraction, if you're following me. So during an in-person conversation, the brain focuses partly on the words being spoken, but also derives additional meaning from dozens of nonverbal cues. We all know this, right? It's 92% of it's body language of how we communicate. It's not a text. So such as someone is facing you slightly or turning away or fidgeting. So having a crucial conversation, which is a whole book, by the way, I have it right here, several copies of it. It's one of my favorite books. It's referenced in the back of this. It's super important to go in with what you're looking to get out of that crucial conversation. And if we're doing it on the phone or text, it's not a crucial conversation. It has to be in person. It's super hard to get our teens to come out of their room, to get off their phones and look at us. I know. And so it's like, okay, so we haven't trained our brain to communicate face to face as much. And we're just, my kid won't get out of the room. My kid won't get out of the room. They don't come out. Okay, well, what's your mandatory rule about dinner? I don't know. So we have to do our best in this, but we have to start doing this in-person conversation. Okay. So there's a couple links there too. So phone and gaming. So on to this. So mirroring neurons are they're real. I just have to say, there's been too much research on it now, from the 90s with a monkey to way back in the 60s with babies looking at their mother, right? And so we found that this really is crucial. So what happens when you're on your phone or gaming all the time? So anything that you're mirroring, we're actually mirroring what is happening. And we think that our brain actually thinks that we're doing it. So this is where we've gone into avoidant behavior and addiction. If you want to call it that. It's not in the DSM, so I have a hard time even saying that, but it is an addiction of avoidant behavior. So it's not a distraction anymore. Remember, a distraction is a good, healthy reward system. I can distract and go to the movies for 2 hours. I can watch Netflix for 2 hours. That's a max 1 hour for a teen, by the way. And it's not an avoidant. But after we escape everything else and uncomfortable feelings and we're doing avoidant behavior, remember, fight, flight, or freeze, addiction, burnout, and mental health, like depression, puts us into avoidant behavior. So it escapes us from uncomfortable feelings. We get down and down and down because we don't want to face feelings. And so we just go to avoid behaviors. And so, and then we self-soothe. So, okay, so you got everything now? So has everything come together now? I hope. So here's the signs: failure, competition, disapproval, substance abuse, harmful self-soothing, sleep, diet, exercise, disturbances. We're not moving, we're not eating good, we're not sleeping good. And then we have phobias. Okay, so those are signs. Okay, also signs that there's some disruption in this avoidant behavior. Changing is in eating and sleep. I already said that. Withdrawal from friends, avoidant action, rebellious behavior, running away, for example. Already said drugs, alcohol, marked personality changes. So what does that mean? Marked personality changes. When you have avoidant behavior going on, your personality is not the same. I mean, how many times do parents tell me, I don't know what's happening. They used to be bubbling, happy, and all right. So we've got some avoidant behaviors going on. They're avoiding friends. They're avoiding activities. Persistent boredom that they can't. So it's like, oh, I'm bored. I can't handle it. Quality of work in school declines. Physical complaints, stomach aches, emotional distress, headaches, loss of interest, I said. So they don't tolerate praise and they don't tolerate some rewards. So then you're like, well, then how are we rewarding them to get to better behaviors? That's tough because nothing, like I said, nothing is motivating too much of our kids. So we take away their phone and that's all we got. And then they're bleed to death. And they're a mess until they get it back. And then they manipulate to get it back. Tell me if I'm off. Tell me if anyone's not experiencing this at all. But safety behaviors maintains anxiety, and we've got to have breaks. So it's 1 hour and less of any gaming, phone, Netflix, porn, anything that you're mirroring and watching, which is gambling also, is turns into an extreme avoidant behavior. Okay, because of this. And these are the signs. Okay, competition. We're in deep competition, especially, that's what gaming is, right? Okay, so how do we help this? How do you pick your boundaries around this? So this is a little statistic up here: 2.4 hours on the phone, 1 hour on computer, and 1 hour on TV. That's one of the latest statistics I found in the technology with families research that I did. So add it up: 2.5 hours plus 3.5, 4.5. We're almost at 5 hours of screen time in a day. Tell me that your kids or your teens aren't doing that. My 18-year-old, like, she's not even in school, she was definitely doing that. That's a part-time job. So that's 25 hours a week in the school days. That's only 5 days. So still think about the weekend. So teaching about unwanted harm, danger, bullying, stalking, hate crimes, join them in this. Don't freak out. Set up guidelines. Do what they're doing. If you know what they're doing and you're gaming with them and they're watching YouTube and you are with them, but I'm telling you, this is not easy. They don't let you in their room, right? They're not going to let you watch YouTube with them. Anybody watch YouTube with their teen? What are you finding that they're watching? Why don't you chime in with the chat? Help us out here. Like what? So educational homework. Okay. And here's the reward system. So parental controls, of course. There is a way to unplug, I promise you. It's called turn off the electricity if you have to, turn off the Wi-Fi if you have to, take the cord. I call it take the cord. That's all if there's a point where a child really needs to go back to the screen, if they're having these symptoms with avoidant behavior, we are in serious long-term neural pathway habits that we have to undo. And it takes over 6 months to even start that. So we have to take the cord. We have to unplug. We have to get out of burnout. We have to have some boundaries if we want them to be more successful, but it's going to take a long time. So, oh yeah, TikTok and Netflix. I didn't even name them all, right? For sure. I mean, the TikTok thing, it's everywhere. Fly on me. It's everywhere. And it's like we just watch it over and over and over and over and over again. What is that? That is an avoidance. And our brain thinks that we're actually doing it. If we're going to watch something violent over and over and over again, our brain actually will fire is as if we did it instead of if we just watched it. So our brain doesn't know the difference. So we go into this other part, it's almost like your subconscious. So what happens when the rules are broken? So then we go into families. If we're talking about family time here and values, you go into having a crucial conversation with your family and doing, I call it just hot topic time. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So what happens when rules are broken? Have a 30-minute conversation with everybody and everybody's happy. It's Sunday at 3:00 and it's mandatory. And we're going to talk about what happens when the rules are broken. And these are my top 3 boundaries. And that's it, and what happens when those top 3 boundaries are broken? When I check your phone, or if you won't let me have your phone and you starting to, like, okay, it's time, you need to give me your phone. I need to check it at any time. In the car is the best. Like you stop and you're like, okay, hand me your phone. And I'm going to take it in the house and check everything out, and they'll freak out. And it's like, okay, then, what's going on? They're hiding something that needs to be out on the table, right? And then you have to decide what that looks like. This has happened multiple times where something comes across their phone and parents finally see it and they find out that 6 months ago something happened, or they're doing something that needs to be addressed. And then we just talk about it. So what's your rules about mealtime, peers using their phones, things like that. So, okay. So just some ideas on how to break away from this. Okay. So let's talk about suicide, because this is another hot topic. Okay. This is just some statistics about how far and how deep we're in. Okay. This is preventable 100%. Of course, we're predicted, this was before COVID, of 2030, that we're going to have some serious depression in 18 and older. That was a statistic for 18 and older, but 80 to 90% will seek treatment for depression. That's a lot of people, but they can get medication treatment, and so it's successful. So that's a lot of success to me. That's a pretty high statistic, but many youth die by suicide with no history of mental health services. Usually zero. They've never been on meds before. They've never had therapy before. No one knew. This other one, teenagers that are planning to commit suicide complain of being a bad person or feeling rotten inside, give verbal hints with statements such as, I won't be a problem anymore. Nothing matters. I hear a lot, I just don't really want to exist. But that doesn't always mean that they want to commit suicide and they have a plan. They put their affairs in order, of course, become steadily cheerful after a period of depression. Right? And they have signs of psychosis. So it's a little bit of hallucinations, delusions, disassociation. That you have to get disassociated to think about taking your life. So that's very common to go into those. So how do you talk about it? How do we talk to our kids about this? Here's some ideas, and here's some questions. So it's not when they're in their back of their brain. Remember, when they're throwing a fit and kicking the wall, you don't ask them like, are you going to hurt yourself? Because they might say something at that point, right? That's when they actually say, it's like, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, and I'm out of here. And what does that mean? So you have to talk about that. So back to that crucial conversation that you're going to have as a family and the boundaries. So remember my bar that said, you can't hurt yourself or others? This is one of them. We can't just go around threatening to kill ourselves. It is exactly what we cannot have said randomly. If you say it, just so you know, we're taking you to the emergency room. That's the rule. So you put that rule down, because I have 8, 9, 10-year-olds saying they want to die, and they're saying it multiple times in a week, and their little siblings and their older siblings hear that. We don't just say it. If we are going to say it, we're going to the emergency room, and you're going to get assessed. So it's also against the law to threaten to harm yourself or threaten to kill yourself. It is against the law. Your teens can actually run away, and it's not against the law until it's 1 a.m. And then you can say, wow, it's past curfew, so now I can call the cops and have them come pick you up. But if they say they're going to kill themselves, you can call 911, full permission to call 911 and say, I've got a kiddo that's threatening to kill themselves. I need help. I need an officer to come to my house. Believe me, I've had a few officers in my house. I had a few foster kids for sure. I had an 8-year-old kid grab a knife out of my kitchen drawer and take it to the fridge, and walk over by the fridge and want to stab himself. So you can't threaten this, by the way. You cannot walk around threatening it as a manipulation. I promise, if anyone's saying that, that kiddo is very, very, very hurt, and we need some therapy and some interventions. And if that is going to the emergency room or calling 911, full permission to do, you don't call the suicide hotline. You call 911 and you go to the nurse emergency room. So I wanted to make that very clear. It's not like, okay, so these are some questions to ask outside of that along the way, but I want the kiddo to report to a parent, I'm feeling okay today. I'm feeling really hopeless today. So you're not badgering them about their feelings, because that's kind of hard too. A lot of kids report that it's like, it's not helpful. Because I like role play that in therapy, like with the teen and the parent or something. And I'm like, are you doing okay? Are you doing okay? Do you feel like you're going to kill yourself today? Or you hurt yourself? Or did you eat today? Are you going to harm yourself? Did you do self-harm? Did you cut, like that is too much. Okay. Is what they report. They never say, yes, that's helpful. No kid in my office have ever said that's helpful. So you have to be just in tune. Remember, the first part of this PowerPoint is how to connect and get your teen in a place that's safe. So you can say, hey, let me know how you're doing. It seems like you're a little more hopeless today. Is everything okay? And okay is my favorite word. Are you okay? Are you okay? Or are you not okay? And sometimes it's like this. So honestly, my kids, they just tell me this or this in the therapy. I'm just like, yeah, it's like this. It's like this. It's been like this. Great. Question in the chat. Does this mean that if they say it many times or just once in a while? So this is many times. So when it's once in a while, say once a month. If it's more than that, it's not okay. Now we've got more intervention that we need to do, and we need to get to the bottom of that, of what they're saying. And they're like, well, I don't mean it. Well, it's not something we just throw around. It's against the law to threaten suicide. So you have to decide what that looks like. If we're saying it once in a while, we're still, even if it's once in a while, if that's once a month, we're in therapy, because that's not okay. And so we have to understand. So basically what I did with one kiddo was we changed the word, because it was not okay to say, I want to die. Okay. That's a big one. I mean, 8-year-old, 5-year-old, I've had 7-year-old, like 10-year-old, 12-year-old, I want to die. Is that okay to walk around and say inside the family with other children? It's trauma. It's complete traumatic statement. So, and the kiddo doesn't really want to die. That just means they're feeling hopeless. And so it's actually an emotion that we need to find. So we changed the word. I had them pick a word that really what was going on, which was, maybe it was hopeless, right? Or I'm overwhelmed. So it's like, I don't want to die anymore. No, it's like, it's I am overwhelmed instead of I want to die. So she had to change the word. So do you see what I'm saying? So it's not that we're discounting it. We're handling it a little different. And it seems like you're really depressed. Well, yeah, I am actually hopeless and overwhelmed. I'm really lonely and bored right now. My friend did this at school. Oh, okay. You'll understand the other stuff that's coming on. So have you been having thoughts about killing yourself? You can say that. If you've got a kid that has suicidal thoughts, active suicidal thoughts, we've got to ask those questions in a safe environment. And then the Safe app, Utah Safe app, is a great one to download for everyone now. They upped it a little bit for adults, so you can text anything to that app. So if you have a kiddo that wants to download that, that's what I'm saying. What happens when we cut off their arm and take away their phone? And now there is times where we do take away the phone. Don't get me wrong, when they're breaking the law. and they're having, sexual content on their phone. They are cyberbullying. They are, then it's gone when they're breaking the law. But we need to have accessibility to calling 911, the suicide prevention, calling friends. Remember, they're going to call friends first, and they're going to talk to a friend first. And we have to have accessibility to mindfulness, music, and the Safe app, Utah Safe app. Okay, you can watch this. It's just a little YouTube video about family, if you want, how to spend time together. And I went too fast. It's gonna skip. So these are just some tips on how to have family time. This is from several different books, but dinner time is still number one. Cleaning up your environment, balance, family boss time with each children. If you want to know more about that, you can email me. It's like a play therapy thing that you're just giving one-on-one time with your kid, and they're the boss. Mission statements, remember top 5 values. So pick your top 3 things that you're going to talk about and say, this is the limit, and this is what the consequence will be. What do you think about that? And so pick one of these. Just pick one value and stick to it, and then work on that, and then go to the next one and the next one. But hot topic time once a week for 30 minutes, that's what I'm talking about with this. It's just hot topic time. You put things on a notebook, you put things in a jar, you draw it out, you go through the notebook, and you can say, let's make sure it's safe to talk about these things. So this makes it really fun, actually, is if you put things in the jar that you need to talk about as hot topics as families, like Sally's stealing stuff out of my bedroom and Tommy keeps on kicking me. Okay, let's put it in the jar. What does that mean? What does that mean? And then they're going to pull it out and say, yeah, that's not okay. That's domestic violence and bullying. And then one of our value system is to be honest, and you're taking things from other people in the family. So you talk about it, write it down. Okay, we're out of time, but mirroring neurons. Remember, I just repeated this. So this is just a little bit more on that, how to listen, validate, and reflect inside of that hot topic time as a family or with your teen. This is how, you can know your label, your emotions, mindset, journal, shift, healthy mind platter. This is all from Dan Siegel, the Brainstorm, okay? So this is just how to repair it if you need to. That's why that book is so crucial. Okay, do your best, repair it. As parents, we can only control the people of our adolescents are becoming. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And Viktor Frankl, live as you were living a second time, and as though you had acted wrongly the first time. If we could show that to our kids, and if you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, you can look up his book. Let's see, is there some examples we can watch of how these techniques work with youth? Examples to watch? No. Workshops, more workshops, yes. Growth mindset parenting handout there. And this is my other handout of self-discipline, right? Delaying gratification, we talked about a little bit. How do we do self-control, take back power without cutting off their arm? Our reward system has to happen. So distraction is 10 minutes to 2 hours for adults. 2 hours plus is avoidance. So with teens, it's 1 hour. They can't play video games for more than 1 hour or it's an avoidance, okay? And they will want to do it again if there is a reward system. And so we all go to work, we have a paycheck, we're motivated to do it again. We're self-disciplined again. And this is the 5 R's handout. And just going to go through these real quick so they're on your video. So this is my secondary and primary emotional will. So remember, loss, grief, and trauma and powerless. We don't do so well when we're in there with crucial conversations. We got to get out of that a little bit. And these are the references. So let me make sure I went through most of these. So there's Brainstorm and Mindsight. That's Dan Siegel. Okay. 52 Ways to Connect with Your Smartphone Obsessed Kid. I found that book pretty interesting. I never recommend a book without reading some of it, or I don't read every word of a book because I have so many, but that one I have not ordered actually, but every single one, and Lost Connections is a great one. How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child, that's Gottman. That's the 5 steps. Men's Search for Meaning, that's Frankel. Covey, 7 Habits, and Brene Brown. Okay,